When Luo Li's slightly angered voice rang out, the air in the space seemed to freeze abruptly. A powerful pressure spread out, causing the very space to tremble. Impudent! Elder Winterchill, the Western Battle Emperor's most loyal subordinate, immediately shouted in a stern voice, his sharp gaze locking onto Luo Li, who dared to offend the Western Battle Emperor. Mu Chen furrowed his brows and stepped forward to shield Luo Li. Meanwhile, his hand inside his sleeve gripped a stone talisman. As long as he crushed it, he could instantly summon the martial ancestor's spiritual avatar. Although this was his last trump card, Mu Chen did not hesitate. If the Western Battle Emperor truly disregarded his status to target them, he would have no choice but to summon the martial ancestor. He was curious, given the deep-seated grievances between the martial ancestor and the Western Battle Emperor, how the latter planned to deal with the situation once the martial ancestor arrived. However, the Western Battle Emperor remained indifferent. He looked at Luo Li and said, "What have I done that was excessive?" Even in the face of the Western Battle Emperor, Luo Li showed no fear. Her delicate brows furrowed slightly, and her voice carried a hint of coldness as she replied, "Why feign ignorance, Battle Emperor? The continental baptism power is extremely limited. According to past distribution rules, lower Earth Supremes and upper Earth Supremes each receive 3 portions, while those at perfect Earth Supreme level receive 4. Yet now, instead of addressing the distribution, you expect us to fend for ourselves? That makes no sense." Hearing Luo Li's words, Mu Chen finally understood. So the continental baptism power had always been allocated directly in the past to ensure fairness. After all, perfect Earth Supremes were far stronger than the other 2 ranks. If everyone competed in the same space, they would inevitably seize the majority of the power. By Mu Chen's estimate, if things proceeded this way, Elder Winterchill alone might seize 60% or more of the baptism power, while he and Luo Li would be left fighting over the remaining 40%, if not less. The continental baptism power was formed by the condensation of heaven and earth spiritual energy over centuries. Gaining or losing even a fraction of it could mean a world of difference. Clearly, while the Western Battle Emperor had reluctantly tolerated their unexpected interference, he had also set obstacles in their path. Even after hearing Luo Li's argument, the Western Battle Emperor's expression remained unchanged. He merely chuckled and said, "This allocation rule varies from place to place. Ultimately, it is decided by the Lord of the continent. I have the authority to determine the distribution. Even if you summon the Flame Emperor, I would still have justification. The path of cultivation has always been survival of the fittest. If you fail to seize enough baptism power, that is your own shortcoming. If you can't even overcome this hurdle, then even if you become the continental heir, you will never reach the heavenly supreme realm." Luo Li's brows arched in defiance, and she was about to argue further when Mu Chen raised a hand to stop her. "The Battle Emperor may lack magnanimity, but his words are not entirely wrong," Mu Chen said with a smile. The veiled jab in Mu Chen's words made the Western Battle Emperor's brow twitch, but he did not respond. He simply gave Mu Chen a scrutinizing look and asked, "So, you have no objections to my distribution method?" Mu Chen nodded with a smile. "There is no such thing as absolute fairness in this world. The path of the strong requires relentless advancement. If one lacks the ability and lets an opportunity slip away, that is their own problem." Luo Li looked at Mu Chen, puzzled by his acceptance of such an unfair arrangement. However, trusting him, she remained silent. Seeing Mu Chen's apparent compliance, a flicker of intrigue flashed through the Western Battle Emperor's gaze. This young man had defied expectations time and again, even he dared not underestimate him now. "In that case," Mu Chen continued, "I have one more question. If the final outcome does not align with your expectations, do you intend to intervene directly?" The Western Battle Emperor's expression darkened as he frowned. "What do you think?" He had altered the distribution rules under valid reasoning, so even if word spread, no one could fault them. However, if he interfered with the results, he would undoubtedly invite widespread disdain, a considerable blow to his reputation. Seeing his reaction, Mu Chen smiled and nodded. "If that's the case, then I can rest assured. Shall we begin?" Seeing Mu Chen, who showed no sign of worry, the Western Battle Emperor furrowed his brows even deeper. He couldn't tell if Mu Chen was faking calmness or if he truly had some kind of plan. However, no matter what, he, a mere lower Earth Supreme, surely couldn't compete with Elder Winterchill, a perfect Earth Supreme. Could he? With this thought, the Western Battle Emperor's expression softened slightly. He then glanced at Elder Winterchill, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod in response. Elder Winterchill naturally understood the Western Battle Emperor's meaning. It was clear that he was being instructed not to hold back, to take as much continental baptism power as possible, so that Chen wouldn't benefit from it. As for this task, Elder Winterchill felt no difficulty at all. In fact, he secretly rejoiced. After all, in the past, he would only be able to take 40% of the power, but now, with his own abilities, he was confident that he could claim at least 10% each from Chen and Luoli. That would give him 60% of the continental baptism power, which felt like a windfall to him. After giving the hint to Elder Winterchill, the Western Battle Emperor waved his hand and said, "Since there are no issues, let's begin. Remember, you only have the time of a single incense stick to divide the areas. Once the incense burns out, the continental baptism power will start to divide and transform into baptism light, beginning the process of baptism. At that point, you won't be able to fight for the power anymore." Chen's eyes flickered slightly. This meant that within the time it took for the incense to burn, they had to determine how much baptism power they would each hold. Once the power was determined, it would turn into baptism light and begin the process of purification. Whoosh! Chen and Luoli exchanged glances before simultaneously shooting out, heading directly toward the bizarre and otherworldly starry sky. After them, Elder Winterchill's seemingly slow form followed closely, almost as if he were a shadow. In just a few breaths, the three of them arrived in the strange starry sky. Inside the starry sky, giant whales soared and ancient trees swayed. However, these creatures seemed ethereal, passing right through Chen and the others as if they were nothing. But from them, Chen sensed a very ancient and pure kind of spiritual energy. This kind of energy was unfamiliar to Chen. It was incredibly ancient, almost as though it had existed for millennia. Buzz. As Chen immersed himself in the ancient and pure spiritual energy, a powerful spiritual energy fluctuation suddenly erupted. The energy, like solid waves of light, rapidly spread out in all directions. Wherever the spiritual energy passed, it acted like a barrier, forcefully enveloping the entire starry sky within its reach. Chen looked up and saw that Elder Winterchill had already, without hesitation, unleashed his spiritual energy to start dividing the territory. Chen and Luoli exchanged another glance, and without hesitation, they too unleashed their spiritual energy, beginning to carve out their own territories in the ancient starry sky. At first, they didn't engage directly with Elder Winterchill but instead avoided him, focusing on claiming the areas he had yet to reach. However, the starry sky was limited in size, and in less than 10 minutes, the three of them had divided it up. At this point, Elder Winterchill had claimed about 50% of the baptism power in the starry sky, while Chen and Luoli combined had barely managed to claim the remaining 50%. Humph. Elder Winterchill snorted coldly, and with a thought, his spiritual energy surged like a tidal wave, directly rushing toward the areas occupied by Chen and Luoli. Clearly, he was beginning to invade the territories that Chen and Luoli had claimed. Faced with Elder Winterchill's invasion, Chen and Luoli immediately teamed up, their spiritual energies forming layers of defense to try to block his encroachment. However, as the Western Battle Emperor had predicted, Chen and Luoli were only lower Earth Supremes. Even though they joined forces, they were still no match for a perfect Earth Supreme. Thus, their defenses were quickly shattered by Elder Winterchill, as though they were fragile. Within just a few minutes, one area after another fell under Elder Winterchill's control. By now, Elder Winterchill had claimed a full 60%. Watching this scene, a greedy look flashed in Elder Winterchill's eyes. He wanted more, as that would increase his chances of successfully advancing to Heavenly Supreme in the future. "Two juniors, since you lack such fortune, let this old man take care of it for you." Elder Winterchill sneered coldly in his heart, no longer hesitating. His overwhelming spiritual energy surged like towering waves, sweeping wildly toward Chen and Luoli's remaining area. Facing the aggressive Elder Winterchill, Luoli's fair face turned frosty. "Flame Emperor, will you be observing the continental baptism of our Western Heaven continent next?" The Western Battle Emperor turned his gaze toward the Flame Emperor and smiled. The Flame Emperor, upon hearing this, smiled and shook his head. "The place of continental baptism is a secret of each continent, so it is not appropriate for me to take part. That kind of place is where the continent's power gathers, essentially the very core of the continent, and thus it is kept extremely secret. Outsiders are generally not allowed near. I thank the Battle Emperor for the invitation today. If there is an opportunity in the future, I would be honored to host you in my boundless fire domain," said the Flame Emperor with a smile. I have long heard of the great reputation of the boundless fire domain. If the opportunity arises, I will certainly visit, nodded the Western Battle Emperor. Although both are superpowers, he knows well that the foundation of the boundless fire domain far exceeds that of his Western Battle Hall. The Flame Emperor smiled again, and then appeared before Mu Chun and Luo Li. He looked at them with a gentle smile, and said, "Young Mu Chun, you have done well." Mu Chun respectfully cupped his fists, while Luo Li beside him also bowed gracefully, showing respect to the Flame Emperor. If it weren't for the recommendation of Senior Flame Emperor, I probably wouldn't even have the qualification to participate. This great favor, I will never forget, said Mu Chun sincerely. He knew that if it weren't for the Flame Emperor's backing, the Western Battle Emperor would not have allowed him to take part. The Flame Emperor waved his hand and smiled lightly. Don't underestimate youth. This is my own experience. How could I make such a mistake? Mu Chun, one day, you too will reach the same height as I have. Seeing the Flame Emperor so highly regard him, Mu Chun felt a little embarrassed, although he was indeed working hard towards that goal. Today's events are over. I must return to the boundless fire domain now. If you're interested in the future, feel free to visit. Xiao Xiao should be eager to meet you, the Flame Emperor said with a smile. His invitation felt much more sincere compared to the polite words he had exchanged with the Western Battle Emperor earlier. Mu Chun nodded in response. Seeing this, the Flame Emperor did not say more, but instead waved at the two and gradually faded away into nothingness. Follow me, the Western Battle Emperor said, gazing at the place where the Flame Emperor had disappeared. He turned his gaze toward Mu Chun and the others, waved his sleeve, and spiritual light enveloped them. In the next moment, the four of them vanished from the White Jade Plaza. As the four disappeared, the surrounding area of the White Jade Plaza filled with exclamations. Countless figures gradually began to disperse, and it was easy to imagine that with the departure of these people, the competition for the continental heir positions in the Western Heaven continent would spread rapidly. Perhaps it wouldn't be long before the names of the three new continental heirs of Western Heaven continent would quietly spread throughout the great thousand worlds. As the spiritual light faded before Mu Chun, he found that the surroundings had become pitch dark, like being deep within the starry sky. The silence was chilling. A hand, cool and smooth like jade, reached out and gently took Mu Chun's hand. He returned the gesture and turned his head to see Luo Li standing beside him. At this moment, the darkness before them seemed to begin peeling away, and soon Mu Chun saw a dazzling starry sky emerge from the depths of the darkness. In that starry sky, strange and wondrous sights unfolded. Occasionally, enormous whales, radiating spiritual light, soared across the sky, or a kunpeng spread its wings, with towering ancient trees swaying and growing. It was as though this place was an ancient world, and amidst it all, Mu Chun felt an extremely pure and ancient spiritual energy in the air. This energy was completely different from the spiritual energy of the outside world, as if it had originated from the primordial era itself, ancient and refined. This place is where the spiritual energies of the Western Heaven continent converge, said the Western Battle Emperor in a calm tone. After centuries of fusion, this phenomenon has occurred, and your continental baptism will take place here. Next, you will enter the phenomenon and absorb its energy. As for the outcome, that depends on your own fortune, he continued. Upon hearing this, Mu Chun remained unfazed, but Luo Li's eyes suddenly gleamed. What the Battle Emperor means is that we are to draw the baptism power ourselves, she asked. The Western Battle Emperor nodded. Although Mu Chun's desperate resistance prevented him from claiming 80% of the share, 70% was still satisfactory to him. With this thought, Elder Winterchill suppressed his impatience and began to channel his spiritual energy, slowly consuming the power bit by bit. Luo Li saw that Mu Chun's efforts had stabilized the situation, and she couldn't help but breathe a slight sigh of relief. However, her expression remained stern because she could feel that despite their firm resistance, their share was still being slowly devoured by Elder Winterchill. The erosion was just happening much more slowly now. If this continues, after a stick of incense, we'll only be able to hold on to 30% of the share. That would be too little for both of us. Luo Li gently bit her red lips, resolutely deciding that if it really came to that, she would give up her share and leave all the remaining continental baptism power for Mu Chun. Otherwise, with less than 30% of the baptism power, it would be impossible to complete the baptism successfully. Chen, however, was unaware of Luo Li's thoughts. His expression remained calm, without the slightest hint of anger or shock at the spiritual energy defense being gradually consumed. He looked as if he had given up on the contest entirely. Seeing this, Elder Winterchill sneered inwardly. This kid actually knew his place, realizing that, with the two of them being mere juniors, there was no way they could snatch the power from his hands. Since this kid knows his place, I'll leave them 30% of the share. Can't have people saying that I bully juniors. Elder Winterchill grinned, feeling magnanimous. Outside the ancient starry sky, the Western Battle Emperor also witnessed this scene, but he furrowed his brows slightly. He knew that Chen was no weakling. No matter how powerful the opponent, Chen would always dare to fight. Otherwise, when facing someone like him, the Heavenly Supreme, Chen wouldn't have even bothered to show any respect. But why was he merely holding his ground and yielding in the face of Elder Winterchill's pressure? Has he really given up? Or is he holding back? The Western Battle Emperor's gaze flickered, but he found it hard to imagine how Chen could compete with a perfect Earth Supreme. Time passed quickly as the Western Battle Emperor pondered. The time of one stick of incense was almost up, and by this time, Elder Winterchill had claimed around 70% of the ancient starry sky. The vast, ancient spiritual energy flowed through the area he occupied. Haha. As time neared its end, Elder Winterchill could no longer contain his gloating and laughed loudly. With 70% of the share of the baptism power, he finally had some confidence in his future breakthrough to the Heavenly Supreme Realm. Luo Li gripped her jade hand tightly and glanced at Chen. However, the latter's expression remained unchanged. Time ticked on. The ancient spiritual energy in the sky gradually began to glow brightly, indicating it was about to transform into the baptism light. Chen's fingers gently tapped his knee, and just as he sensed the final moments approaching, a brilliant light suddenly erupted from his black eyes. He suddenly rose to his feet, and with a swift motion, an ancient longsword, like crystal, flashed into his hand. Holding the longsword, an indescribably powerful aura surged out, as if he were a god, sweeping through the area. Then, he directed his sword towards Elder Winterchill and slashed. Whoosh! It was as if a beam of crystal light swept through the void, heading straight for Elder Winterchill. That sword was silent, with no apparent momentum. However, upon seeing this sword, the smile on Elder Winterchill's face immediately froze. The next moment, an overwhelming fear spread across his face. Because he sensed an unfathomable fluctuation from that sword, a fluctuation as if he were facing the Western Battle Emperor himself. That was the true aura of the Heavenly Supreme. Heavenly Supreme? Elder Winterchill screamed in horror, his soul nearly leaving his body. His body instinctively retreated at full speed, quickly pulling back the spiritual energy that had been surging and forming numerous layers of defensive barriers in front of him. Boom, boom, boom. The crystal sword light swept through, and countless layers of spiritual energy defenses collapsed one after another. Elder Winterchill's face turned even paler, and just as the crystal sword light was about to strike, he roared and unleashed all his spiritual energy without reserve. He took a deep breath, and in the next instant, a deep blue cold current shot out from his mouth. This cold current seemed insignificant, but as it was released, even Elder Winterchill's eyes dimmed, clearly indicating that he had expended all his power. Boom! The deep blue cold current collided with the crystal sword light. The cold current first shattered, but as it did, the crystal sword light also gradually dimmed, and finally shattered along with the cold current's dissipation. Hiss! The shattered sword light left deep bloody marks across Elder Winterchill's chest, but he froze in astonishment. The sword imbued with the Heavenly Supreme's aura had actually been blocked by him? A moment ago, he truly thought he would die under that sword. Yet, it seemed that although dangerous, the sword was not as terrifying as he had imagined. Elder Winterchill stood dazed for a moment, before suddenly snapping out of it. He looked up in shock, only to see that during the brief moment when he was stunned by that sword, Chen had directly activated his spiritual energy and reclaimed all the portions he had previously taken. At this moment, Elder Winterchill was left with only 3/10 of the share. You brat! Elder Winterchill roared in fury, his terrifying spiritual energy exploding. But just as he was about to launch a counterattack, the ancient spiritual energy in the starry sky began to transform into a blinding light, covering the entire space. It felt as though the entire space had been frozen, and Elder Winterchill's body was trapped like an insect in amber, unable to move. Frozen in place, his furious gaze turned towards Chen's direction, only to see a mocking smile appear on the latter's youthful face. Endless light erupted in the ancient starry sky, and the ancient spiritual energy that had once been gentle now unleashed terrifying power, directly freezing the entire starry sky. In that frozen starry sky, it seemed even time itself began to slow down. In one corner of the frozen starry sky, Elder Winterchill's body was frozen, his face filled with rage, but unable to move a single muscle due to the space's immobilization. Yet his gaze remained fixed on Mu Chen, his heart churning with shock from the abrupt change that had just occurred. He never expected that, at the final moment, Mu Chen's counterattack would be so vicious and swift. That sword definitely carried the true aura of the Heavenly Supreme. However, after the clash, its power did not reach the level Elder Winterchill had anticipated. The sword could indeed pose a great danger to him. One wrong move could even lead to heavy injury. But it had not reached the level that would completely overwhelm him. His fear came entirely from the Heavenly Supreme aura carried by that sword. He feared it was a trump card left for Mu Chen by the Flame Emperor. The Flame Emperor was no ordinary figure, and even a card given to Mu Chen would likely be enough to deal with him easily. Thus, in that fleeting moment, to preserve his life, Elder Winterchill withdrew all his spiritual energy to form a defense. In the end, although he had blocked it, he lost the portion of the continental baptism power he had painstakingly seized earlier, and worse, he lost an additional 10%. Now, he was left with only 3/10 of the share. This was worse than an even distribution. Damn it, sly brat. Elder Winterchill cursed inwardly, filled with regret. He shouldn't have been so arrogant earlier. If he had prepared sooner, he wouldn't have been caught off guard by Mu Chen's sudden and overwhelming sword attack, which had completely ruined his previous efforts. As Elder Winterchill wallowed in regret, outside the starry sky, the Western Battle Emperor also looked at the scene with a grim expression, his heart slightly shaken as he glanced at Mu Chen. The previous sword indeed carried the aura of the Heavenly Supreme. However, it was not the aura of the Flame Emperor, but another vast and unfathomable presence. One that, at its peak, could possibly surpass even him. The Flame Emperor mentioned that Mu Chen had received the inheritance of the Heavenly Emperor. If I'm not mistaken, that sword from earlier should have been left by the Heavenly Emperor. Only with it could he have reclaimed his share. The Western Battle Emperor's gaze flickered slightly. Clearly, he hadn't expected that Mu Chen was hiding such a trump card. What was most startling, however, was Mu Chen's restraint. Even in the face of Elder Winterchill's earlier aggressive actions, he remained calm, waiting until the very moment when Elder Winterchill began to relax, then suddenly struck, reclaiming all the lost share in one move. Such restraint was truly intimidating. The Western Battle Emperor took a deep breath, then sighed helplessly, not glancing at Elder Winterchill again as he turned and left. Now that the situation was settled, Elder Winterchill had lost his last chance. The little tricks he had tried to play on Mu Chen were now completely neutralized by him. At this point, the baptism light had already begun to transform. Unless Elder Winterchill relied on his Heavenly Supreme strength to forcefully intervene, there was nothing that could disturb Mu Chen's baptism. But doing so would undoubtedly break the rules, and the news would spread, undoubtedly drawing ridicule. The Western Battle Emperor, who valued his reputation, could never tolerate that. Moreover, behind Mu Chen stood both the Flame Emperor and the Martial Ancestor. If he really took such extreme measures, even the Flame Emperor, who had previously conversed with him amiably, would surely develop negative feelings toward him. To deal with a mere Mu Chen, at such a heavy cost, the Western Battle Emperor clearly wasn't willing. Even if this kid really becomes the continental heir, what then? Looking at the present, the chance for the continental heir to break through to the Heavenly Supreme is slightly higher, but even then, it's still a relative probability. More than 90% of them will still fall short and never reach the Heavenly Supreme. The Western Battle Emperor thought to himself, then gave a faint smile as his figure disappeared into the ancient starry sky. As long as they hadn't reached the Heavenly Supreme, whether it was a lower Earth Supreme or a perfect Earth Supreme, in his eyes, they were all just ants. As the Western Battle Emperor left, in another vast region of the ancient starry sky, Mu Chen's smile grew more pronounced, clearly satisfied with the final result. The force he had borrowed in the end was naturally the Heavenly Emperor's sword, which carried the lingering aura of the Heavenly Emperor. That indeed was the true aura of the Heavenly Supreme, which had initially frightened Elder Winterchill. However, what Elder Winterchill didn't know was that the sword's power had already been greatly depleted when the Heavenly Emperor had used it to slay the 9-corpse Heavenly Demon Emperor. The remaining strength could only allow Mu Chen a few more uses. Thus, in order to avoid a protracted standoff, Chen chose to act at the last moment. Even if Elder Winterchill regained his senses, it would already be too late to act. The outcome was clearly within Chen's expectations and even surpassed them. What he had initially planned was only to reclaim the share that belonged to them, but unexpectedly, he had also taken away Elder Winterchill's portion. Clearly, he had underestimated how much the aura of the Heavenly Supreme could intimidate Elder Winterchill. With that thought, Chen couldn't help but smile, then his gaze shifted toward Luoli's direction. When he had reclaimed the share earlier, Luoli had divided the territory, but she had only taken 30%, leaving 40% for Chen. This girl. Chen sighed inwardly, but didn't dwell on it too much. After all, Black and White Chen were also staying here, and he had intentionally done this because he wanted to subject these two avatars to the continental baptism as well. Let's begin. Chen murmured softly to himself, closing his eyes. Buzz. It was as if the heavens had heard his thoughts. Just as his words fell, the ancient, pure spiritual energy in his area erupted in a brilliant light, sweeping down to envelop and engulf all three Chens. Radiance enveloped him, and Chen immediately felt the ancient spiritual energy permeating his body, as though it was seeping in from every pore. His blood and flesh began to boil, greedily devouring this ancient energy in a frenzied manner. The sensation was akin to an infant savoring the sweetest of mother's milk, an instinctive yearning deep within. As the ancient spiritual energy infiltrated Chen's body, it clashed with his own spiritual energy. It felt as though clear, tranquil waters suddenly had thickening poured into them, quickly causing his spiritual energy to become heavier. Under the baptism of this ancient power, Chen could feel every muscle, bone, and vein in his body, even his spiritual energy, undergoing a profound transformation. Roar. As immense changes surged within Chen, he suddenly heard the sound of a dragon's roar and a phoenix's cry echo from within him. To his surprise, the true dragon and true phoenix spirits, which had not been used in a long time, emerged once again from within his body. Since Chen had broken through to the lower Earth Supreme level, the true dragon and true phoenix spirits had remained dormant, offering little assistance in battle, and so he had gradually forgotten about them. But now, under the baptism of the ancient spiritual power, these spirits awakened and began to greedily consume the energy. As they did, Chen could faintly sense that their strength was rapidly advancing toward the Earth Supreme level. At this rate, it wouldn't be long before they too would break through to the Earth Supreme level. When that time came, their role in assisting Chen would once again be significant. Indeed, being a continental heir has endless benefits. Feeling the immense changes within his body, even Chen, with his composed nature, couldn't help but feel a surge of ecstatic joy. No wonder Elder Winterchill was so eager. It turned out that the wonders of this process were truly extraordinary. The baptism light is so powerful that it directly solidifies both space and time, which is why time here flows differently from the outside world. According to the time here, this baptism will likely last several years, but in the outside world, only a few months may pass. As Chen felt the changes within his body, he also noticed that time around him had slowed down. Clearly, the baptism power had altered the space and time in this area. This baptism would undoubtedly last for a significant period. For Chen, this brought a sense of quiet relief. His cultivation speed far surpassed that of ordinary people. Though his talent was exceptional, sometimes he still needed to slow down and refine himself. No matter how fine the jade, it still requires meticulous carving. And this meticulousness sometimes requires time to nurture. Chen slowly closed his eyes, his mind gradually focusing and sinking into a deeper state of cultivation. During this extended baptism, he needed to properly digest his progress. Only by accumulating and refining his power could he make another breakthrough in this continental baptism. In the ancient starry sky, boundless light constantly erupted, solidifying space and time. Only the 5 figures within the radiance emitted a faint sense of vitality. And time itself, in this timeless silence, slowly flowed on. 1 month after the Continental Air Championship in the Western Heaven continent ended, its popularity not only remained undiminished but continued to ferment. The heat even began to spread beyond the Western Heaven continent, reaching the Great Thousand Worlds. The title of Continental Heir was a resounding name in the Great Thousand Worlds. Every Continental Heir was a prodigy, a genius, often possessing the potential to challenge the Heavenly Supreme. Though few would ultimately succeed. But regardless, earning the title of Continental Heir was a symbol of strength and potential. No one could be certain who among these Continental Heirs would rise to become the next Heavenly Supreme in the Great Thousand Worlds. This is why any news related to the continental heirs captured such attention in the Great Thousand Worlds, even though the Western Heaven continent was not particularly renowned in the vast expanse of the Great Thousand Worlds. When the continental heir of the Western Heaven continent was announced this time, it unsurprisingly drew the attention of numerous powerful factions. However, their intentions were far from benevolent. Most were contemplating whether they could lure this newly revealed continental heir away. After all, every continental heir possessed the potential to become a heavenly supreme. If they could recruit such a talent, and that individual eventually broke through, the enhancement to their faction's strength would be immeasurable. When the major superpowers learned of the 3 chosen continental heirs from the Western Heaven continent, it caused a considerable stir. They were shocked to discover that among the 3, one had managed to dominate the upper Earth Supreme battlefield despite only being at the strength level of a lower Earth Supreme. Who exactly is this Chen? How did he claim the title of Continental Heir in the upper Earth Supreme battlefield while only being a lower Earth Supreme? Is the upper Earth Supreme level in the Western Heaven continent really that weak? This Chen is definitely extraordinary. I've heard rumors of his connection to the Flame Emperor. Could he be his disciple? As news of Chen's astonishing achievements spread across the Great Thousand Worlds, similar speculations arose among the top factions. That continental heir from the lower Earth Supreme battlefield is remarkable too. She actually cultivated the Luotian divine body. What a stunning girl. So this is the legendary Supreme Dharmakaya that the ancient Luotian cultivated, the most beautiful supreme body in the Great Thousand Worlds? It's ranked 11th on the supreme body ranking, isn't it? She has boundless potential. Perhaps she too will reach the level of a heavenly supreme in the future. Following Chen, Luo Li naturally became the center of attention. The brilliance of the Luotian divine body was simply too dazzling. Its beauty was mesmerizing, captivating all who laid eyes upon it. Moreover, Luo Li's displayed talent left many in awe. It was as if they were witnessing the reincarnation of that legendary beauty from the ancient era, the one who had enchanted countless heavenly supremes across the Great Thousand Worlds. Compared to the immense focus on Chen and Luo Li, Elder Winterchill garnered far less attention. The intelligence reports made it clear that he was personally nurtured by the Western Battle Emperor, ensuring his unwavering loyalty. Since poaching him was nearly impossible, there was little reason to dwell on him. Nevertheless, the revelation of the 3 continental heirs from the Western Heaven continent sent ripples throughout the Great Thousand Worlds, drawing not only attention but also other, more enigmatic interests. Somewhere within the Great Thousand Worlds, in a bustling metropolis, an elderly man dressed in simple robes strolled slowly down a crowded street, leaning on his cane. A red gourd hung from his waist, swaying gently with each step. Though his posture appeared hunched, the throngs of people moving around him never seemed to brush against him, as if he existed in a different dimension altogether. Suddenly, he halted. Lifting his cloudy eyes, he gazed toward the side of the street, where a spiritual energy barrier shimmered. Within it, an intense battle was unfolding. To the old man, such a level of combat was almost child's play. Yet, as his gaze sharpened upon the battlefield within the barrier, a piercing light erupted from his previously murky eyes. He fixated on a breathtakingly elegant figure within the battle. After a long pause, a grin spread across his face. He unfastened the gourd from his waist, took a heavy swig, and chuckled. The heavens do not disappoint those who seek. A fine seedling indeed, a fine seedling. As his words faded, he suddenly turned, and in that very moment, his aged figure vanished into thin air. The Great Thousand Worlds, 10,000 Islands continent. This was a truly unique land, composed of countless islands. Despite being labeled as islands, many of them were vast, rivaling even some of the smaller continents in size. At the heart of this 10,000 islands continent lay a massive island covered entirely by a lush bamboo forest. Mist swirled above its surface, and powerful heaven and earth spiritual energy gathered in abundance, marking it as a rare and precious land for cultivation. Upon closer inspection, one would notice that the bamboo trees were unlike ordinary ones. They gleamed like emerald jade, their entire forms radiating a faint luminescence. A delicate fragrance drifted through the air. Merely inhaling it could calm the mind, and even one's spiritual energy would begin to flow more smoothly in response. This green bamboo is called emerald spirit bamboo, and it can be used to make emerald spirit incense. When lit during cultivation, it not only enhances training efficiency, but also prevents the practitioner's spiritual energy from going astray and falling into demonic deviation. For many cultivators, this is a rare treasure. It is said that a single stick of emerald spirit incense can be exchanged for nearly 10,000 drops of supreme spiritual liquid. Right now, this island is completely covered with emerald spirit bamboo. If it were to be traded for supreme spiritual liquid, it would be worth at least $1 billion or so. Such an enormous value is something even top-tier forces would struggle to extract, no matter how much they drained it. Generally speaking, places like this are bound to attract countless covetous eyes, especially on the 10,000 Islands continent, where numerous factions stand tall and various warlords rule the seas with supreme arrogance. However, even those forces with Super Earth Supreme experts in charge would not dare to covet Emerald Spirit Island. This is because Emerald Spirit Island belongs to one of the 5 ancient clans of the Great Thousand Worlds, the Futu Ancient Clan. The Futu Ancient Clan is one of the oldest races in the Great Thousand Worlds, with an incredibly deep foundation that no one can fathom. Even superpowers possessing heavenly supremes would show considerable caution when dealing with this ancient clan. Therefore, with the Futu Ancient Clan backing it, Emerald Spirit Island is one of the safest places in the entire 10,000 Islands continent. Any forces that venture here show the utmost respect, not daring to display even a hint of greed or hostility. They all understand very well that, despite their dominance on the 10,000 Islands continent, in the eyes of the Futu Ancient Clan, a mighty force, these powers are nothing more than small players. If they truly angered the clan, they could easily dispatch a heavenly supreme to wipe out their forces in an instant. Whoosh! A streak of spiritual light suddenly descended from the sky above Emerald Spirit Island, piercing through the protective array around the island before landing in the center. There, a mountain stood tall, its verdant green lush and inviting. On the mountain peak, ancient stone towers appeared sporadically amidst the bamboo forest. The streak of light directly fell in front of the deepest stone tower. At the base of the tower sat an elderly man in a grayish-white robe, quietly meditating. His spiritual energy was faint but, at the same time, emanated an immeasurable and vast aura, leaving one with a sense of deep mystery. The light stopped in front of the elder, and a man kneeled before him. Despite this, the elder remained perfectly still, his eyes not even opening. Only a faint voice seemed to emanate from his belly. "Did I not tell you not to disturb my cultivation?" The man in front of him trembled slightly and quickly replied, "My lord, we have discovered the sin child mentioned in the bounty decree of a major family." Bang! A tremendous surge of spiritual energy suddenly erupted from the elder's body. His tightly shut eyes snapped open, and within them, a storm seemed to gather. His gaze was incredibly stern as he fixed it on the kneeling man and spoke in a deep voice. "The sin child from the bounty decree? Is it the one the Grand Elder mentioned?" "It should be." The man nodded quickly and then, without delay, gestured with his hand. A piece of spiritual jade flew out, emitting a burst of light that formed a barrier in front of them. Within the light barrier, an intense battle unfolded. It was none other than the fierce battle between Chen and the spirit warrior. When Chen summoned the crystalline Futu Pagoda, the elder's eyes suddenly flashed with spiritual light, as if made of substance. His face twitched slightly, and after a moment, he took a deep breath and muttered in shock, "That is actually the Holy Futu Pagoda?" It was no wonder he was so shocked. The Holy Futu Pagoda was extremely rare, even within their Futu Ancient Clan. Only the most gifted members of the clan could have the opportunity to cultivate it. Among the younger generation of the Futu Ancient Clan, only one person had managed to cultivate the Holy Futu Pagoda. This individual was considered a genius of 1,000 years, and many elders within the clan supported the idea of grooming him to become the next clan leader. The young man before them, who had also cultivated the Holy Futu Pagoda, was clearly not the same person as their clan's genius. "This boy is so unfamiliar, he's definitely not from our clan." However, the fact that he can cultivate the Holy Futu Pagoda indicates that he must have Futu blood. Judging from this, he should be the sin child the Grand Elder spoke of. The elder's eyes narrowed slightly, his gaze flickering. Within the Futu Ancient Clan, there were various factions, and he happened to belong to the faction of the heavenly gifted heir. They were all working tirelessly to push the ladder toward becoming the next clan leader of the Futu Ancient Clan. If successful, it would grant them control over many of the clan's powers. The unexpected appearance of this person, who had actually mastered the sacred floating pagoda, was troubling. Although he was merely a sin child with no standing, the actions they were undertaking clearly did not allow for any disruption. As this thought crossed his mind, a fierce glint flashed in the elder's eyes, and the temperature in the surroundings suddenly dropped. He then waved his hand, and a cold voice spread out. "Bring forth the dragon elephant guardian."